Hey everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm reviewing a Tier 9 French heavy tank. It is the AMX M4 MLE51, and this has been one of my favorite Tier 9s that I have played through recently in the game. This thing has mobility, it's got really good frontal armor, including a decent lower plate, for which a lot of Tier 9 heavy tanks suffer, and it's also got a choice of two very competitive guns, 120mm and 127mm, that I'll be telling you the differences of in this video and maybe giving you an indication of what gun is better for what situation and why. Stick around, I've got some Ace Tanker gameplay coming right up after I firstly compare the AMX M451 to some of its Tier 9 heavy tank competition, and if you have no interest in picking up this Tier 9 French heavy, then I'll give you a few tips and tricks as to how you can take it out effectively on the battlefield. So without further ado, let's get started. So firstly, as I mentioned, the AMX M451 has a choice of two competitive guns, the 120mm, which comes as stock, and 127mm. Now the 127mm is completely optional. It costs 63,000 experience to research after you've gone through the turret, and you don't even need it to be able to go on towards the AMX M454. But nevertheless, it's there, it's available, and so I'm going to be comparing the 120mm on the left to the 127mm on the right with the Tier 9 American heavy tank, the M103, the Conqueror, and the E75. Immediately we notice that the damage per minute of the 120mm is identical to the M103 and now just a tiny little bit better than the Conqueror. The 127mm only is a little bit behind that and is significantly better than the DPM on the higher alpha damage E75. Penetration wise, the lower caliber gun is doing better at 257mm, and if you fire premium rounds it goes up to 315 and your shell velocity becomes a very impressive 1,334. However, with the premium rounds on the 127mm, the penetration only goes up to 270mm and your shell velocity doesn't really get very good. And this mediocre premium penetration can make the higher caliber gun very frustrating for when you get into a bad matchup against Tier 9 and Tier 10 tanks. Nevertheless, the advantage of this gun is that it has 470 damage instead of the 400 that the 120mm has. And there's no doubt that can give you a little bit of an edge in some trades, but just remember there are quite a few guns at Tier 9, like on the E75, the WZ-111-14, and also on the VK-4502B, that have 490 alpha, so that doesn't really make that 470 seem all that impressive. Moving on to gun handling, and the 120mm has a very impressive 2 seconds aim time with 0.34 accuracy. That's absolutely great, way better than the 127mm, the M103, but a little bit worse than the Conqueror. If you choose to use the larger caliber gun, your aim time drops to 2.3 seconds, that's just a bit better than the E75, and 0.36 accuracy, which is still better than the M103 and the E75. One thing to watch out for though is when you use the larger caliber gun, your turret traverse gets 50% worse, and so that definitely amplifies the difference in the aim time between these two guns. Depression wise, all of these vehicles have 8 degrees, which makes this vehicle fairly nice on a ridge line, but it pales compared to the Conqueror's 10 degrees. Next up, mobility, and this is where it's also pretty good news for the AMX M451. 40 kilometers an hour forwards, 15 backwards, the same as the E75, but the difference is that this vehicle has the power to weight ratio to be able to use it at over 15, which is 50% better than the E75, and on par with the M103 and just a touch better than the Conqueror. However, the vehicle's ground resistances are just a little bit worse than the American and the British heavy tank, but nevertheless with a decent turret traverse at 28 degrees, which smashes the E75, that makes this tank, if you choose to use the larger caliber gun, pretty nasty for dealing large alpha damage hits before maybe the tank has had a chance to pull back round the corner. This combination of a very powerful 1,100 horsepower engine, some decent ground resistances, and a tank traverse of 28 degrees a second gives this vehicle very nice traverse speeds. Over 40 on hard, 37 on medium, and 22 on soft, and that makes the M103 certainly look sluggish. It also does so to the Conqueror and the E75, which is pretty much one of the highlights of this tank for me, is that its gun handling is nice, its gun is, well, pretty good, and mobility to boot, well, what's not to love? Well, maybe it's going to be the armor, but thankfully that's also kind of not the case. 180mm at the front, 60 on the side, and 40 at the rear, and 300 on the front of the turret, 80 on the side, and 40 at the rear. And so what you should immediately notice here is that the AMX M451 has all of its armor towards the front of the vehicle. Here we can see that its own gun struggles to get through its frontal armor more than a third or half the time, unless of course you hit these two cupolas on the top of the tank. But look what happens when you get the side of the vehicle. This is a gigantic profile. This turret is so fat. Maybe the vehicle's ego is getting out of hand, and so that means that if you give your side profile to your opponents, that is going to be a very quick one-way trip back to the garage. One feature of the tank that I must highlight is these two cheeks on the front. We can see how well angled they are, and that makes them very effective frontally. However, as soon as you turn the tank to the side, maybe you want to try and make your lower plate and your upper hull armor better, then look, they become a big old weak point. And so if an AMX M4 51 is angling like this, going backwards and forwards to try and bounce you, just try and hit the side panel here. And if you've got about 220 millimeters of penetration, you're going to go through it fairly reliably. One of the biggest mistakes I see people doing is just shooting the lower plate of this tank and expecting to go through it, even with lower tiered vehicles. That's not the case. Look, it's 250 millimeters of effective armor, and if you get up into close quarters and you aim down at the lower plate, well, you're just making a big mistake. Sure, if you can aim up into it, it's not too bad, or if you're at a very good distance and you've got decent penetration, you're probably going to get through it. But all I'm saying is don't take this tank's frontal profile for granted. It is very decent, and imagine when you get this thing hull down on a ridgeline frontally. Oh my word, you are going to be bouncing everything, and when you're using that gun depression, they can't even see your weak points on top of the tank. However, one word of advice for budding AMX M4 51 drivers is that your turret is definitely not safe against premium rounds, as that has 300 millimeters of effective armor, and while that's great, it's not as if this is some well-angled, slopey Soviet spherical turret. To go along with this, the vehicle has a standard 1,900 hit points, but rather disappointingly, it has 380 meters view range, and this means that unless you want to put coated optics on the tank and sacrifice vents, I guess, you're really going to struggle to get up to a very decent view range, which is a bit of a downside of this vehicle compared to the Conqueror and the E75. But you know what, I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's see how the tank performs in some gameplay, firstly with the 120mm. So here we go, we're rolling out on Runeberg, and we are in a nice matchup here. We're in a template system where there's only 3 top tier tanks, so many tier 7s, and are they really going to be able to go through the front of me even with premium rounds? Not really. In this kind of a matchup, this tank feels like a beast, and I just love the mobility of the vehicle as well. You can get to where you need to go to then put that armor into effect. Now, as I mentioned, I'm using the 120mm. Do I think the 120mm is better in a matchup like this? No, I'd say with the penetration that the gun has, the advantage on its standard rounds, and also specifically those 315mm penetration APCR rounds, I think this is the gun that does better in the worst matchup, and I think the higher caliber gun is going to be more competitive in a matchup like this. Not better, but the gun is going to be more competitive in a matchup like this than when it has to deal with higher tier tanks. So there's the 257 that I want to take out, because in a matchup like this, I'm just thinking, alright, if I take out the tier 9 heavy, then I'm going to be able to hopefully obliterate the rest of the enemy team. Because apart from the T-49 and artillery shells, or if they're firing premium rounds, I guess, they're not really going to be able to do very much against me. Now, lots of people have been talking about how they struggle against the Object 257, but I've really had no problems. I think that once you understand the armor model of that vehicle, as long as they're not reverse side scraping, and even if they do, you can sometimes go through them shooting in the upper half of the hull rather than the lower part. I guess it's just because of the trolling arm. Look, he wants me to shoot him in the tracks. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait for him to fire. Then I'm going to come around the corner and just shoot him in the upper hull when I'm aiming down on his upper plate like that. I'm not even going to have to dab the 2 key to consistently go through that. And he's got 440 alpha. I've got 400 alpha, which means that I will actually be able to fire more often than he will. And this is where this gun, I feel, just really comes into its own, when you can start to link in multiple shots against your opponents. Now he shoots the Mauerbrecher, exposes his lower plate, and we finish him off. Great result there to put in 3 rounds into the only tier 9 heavy on the enemy team. But talking about tier 9 heavies and taking damage, wow, the UDES there nearly made, well, I guess he could have blown me up in a single shot there. Luckily, our rather large turret stays on top of the tank, and we repair the ammo rack with a quick dab of the 4 and the 2. I think crossing the gap there, I guess it was a little bit aggressive, but I feel like it was the play that I needed to make, because look at all these tanks sitting here. I need to kill them as quickly as I can, because to all intents and purposes, the enemy team might push through the east, and if they win the east, then they're going to flank around here, they're going to come up in this location, they're going to shoot through there, and so I don't want to be sitting on this alleyway here and getting shot in the butt. I'm going to try and break out one of the flanks. That's your only option when you're getting pincered, is to try and break out one of the flanks. And I can't really think of many better tanks for kind of just side-scraping out around the corner here and bouncing a shell, sometimes baiting them into shooting my front plate when I over-angle it and then come around the corner. The Black Prince tracks me, but I don't think he's going to last too long. Oh no, he does manage to put his tracks back on there. I guess he finally decided to use his repair kit, or maybe he just managed to put it back on organically, but the Scorpion finishes him off. And this is where I just love the 120mm gun. You see how you can just snap the shots in so easily, so little aiming, such good accuracy. This is where this tank is just absolutely golden. I just feel so comfortable aiming for a cupola. How did that one not penetrate? That was so weird. Did you... What? That doesn't make sense to me. How did that one not go in? What? I hit him flush on the top. Maybe I... It looks like it penetrated as well. I don't even know. Okay, let's ignore that. We managed to put a round into the IS. Are we going to try and shoot him in the cupola again? Oh, there you go. Okay, everything's back to normal as we're starting to pick apart this Liberté, which is a fantastic crew trainer for this vehicle, by the way, because the crew, I think, are identical with all the right loadouts. And there you go, another one into the cupola of the IS. Not many tier 9 tanks, I guess, apart from like a Conqueror. I would feel just so happy and consistent here with the gun. You really feel like you have a scalpel to aim at weak points, unlike the struggle that I've been having with my ISM recently, where it feels like unless you get to shoot at very weakly armored tanks and you get to side scrape out against them, it is rather frustrating. So the frontal armor on this vehicle held up very well there. Basically, the enemies didn't bother to shoot us because I guess they thought we were side-scraping so well. Of course, you've got to watch out. If you over-side-scrape, you do expose that side weak point. So you definitely want to angle it pretty much about like this, not too much, and be careful. And as soon as you know that somebody has figured out your side weak point and start shooting it, well, just make a change. Instead of side-scraping out like this, just come around the front, try and bait the shot. Sorry, still on the recovery here. And then once you baited the shot, then you can come out and manage to get a shot into them, and hopefully it'll work out. Alright, so we've managed to break through that flank. We're on 6,000 damage in the first 5 minutes of this game. And right now I was just thinking, okay, let's feast. You're also starting to see that the armor is fallible, though, as one of the highest penetration tier 8 tanks, the UDES, goes right through the front of the tank. We'll lose our ammo rack again. That's something that happens all the time in this vehicle. We're going to try and blind fire him. No, we don't hit him. Where was he? What a disaster there. Hopefully we can just drive towards him. He's fired. I see that he's fired at my artillery, so I feel comfortable just advancing towards him. And if he's going to shoot me, well, he's only going to hit me once, and he shoots me in the tracks, and kablamo. There we go. 5th kill secured. 361 hit points remaining, so I can take at least one more hit from the IKV-90B unless he low rolls massively, which I don't think he's going to do twice. And in this scenario, it's let's just get up in his face, bounce a heat round coming from the front of his tank, at the front of my tank, put one into him. I'm going to reload a high explosive round because he's got 423 hit points, and I'd quite like to penetrate him on that upper part of his hull, but somebody damages him, lowering his hit points to 33, and we get to finish him off, securing 7,200 damage, 1,500, I guess, tracking, or actually quite a lot of spotting at the end of this game. 6 kills. Not too bad. But this was a 120mm caliber gun. Now I want to show you what the 127mm caliber gun is like. So we joined the battle in the first couple of minutes. We're going to be assaulting on Karelia. Now that 127mm, we don't have those premium rounds with 315mm of penetration, although I don't think we fired any of them in the last game that I just showed. But 270mm of penetration against tier 9 and tier 10 tanks. Oh, it's not exactly what you want. And I'm not sure about the alpha damage increase. 400 to 470, it's not significant, is it? We're talking about less than a 20% increase. But sometimes it's not so much about the damage increase that you get as it is about the caliber increase that you get. But I'll be showing that to you in just a little second. Well, 515, that is a decent roll indeed, isn't it? We rolled plus 10% there with the higher caliber gun. And I guess a lot of you just really enjoy the alpha damage. And we'll have to see how it works out, if there's any opportunities for us to finish off tanks that we otherwise couldn't. And you've got to be thinking as well about the aim time. Look at that aim time, aiming, so we don't actually manage to get the clean shot on the WZ as he was stationary. And also remember that the shell velocity is worse on this gun as well, so it's much harder to snipe at long range against those rather fast, nippy little Chinese light tanks. One thing I'd like to highlight is, wow, yeah, we just bounced a shell from the T110E3, 750 damage blocked. This vehicle, frontally, is incredibly bouncy, and I don't mind taking chances. Now, I feel that in this game, I have to do something a little bit bold. I can't really hang back there. I want to try and get forwards, and unfortunately, I'm going to get tagged by an E3 in the side and by an AMX M4 54 in the side. Try and look for a shot into his top of his tank. I'm quite happy that went in, because he hit me with the 560 alpha damage, I think 130mm that tank has, at the tier 10. And so I would only be a 50-50 to survive the second shell. So we're going to fire one at the FV4202, 476, very nice, and the T54 Mod 1 finishes off that tier 8 American, gosh, oh no. British medium tank. Oh, at least I corrected myself. Otherwise, I'm sure there'll be people in the comments. Actually, Mr. QuickyBaby, it's a British tank. Why did you say that? I'm sorry. I'm trying to think through all the numbers, trying to talk through all of the different tanks. I must mention, what, about 50 different, at least 100 different things. If I mess up one, then 1%. That's okay. I'll take it. Anyway, T110E3, unable to go through the side of the tank. If I was using the 120mm, would we have been able to go through the side there? Well, possibly. I don't know. It's up to you to decide about what gun is going to be best. And in the end, I can only give my impressions of having used both of the guns and had fairly decent games, at least with both of them. At least that 120mm game on Runeberg was very decent. But I've also had some success with the 127mm as well. I played this tank through a few times off stream. I'm currently still trying to get towards the tier 10 French heavy tank. I think I should be picking that up today after this video when I stream tonight, which I'm looking forward to. It's still on sale, I think, just today and tomorrow, and then it is gone for good from sale. Well, at least not it's still going to be available, but it's no longer going to be 30% off. Now, this is a very key moment here. How the hell did that one go in, you might be asking? All right, now, a lot of you will know about the 3 caliber rule in World of Tanks and the way that penetrations work with overmatching. Now, the E75, how did that shell go in? Well, hello. Yeah, it went through his engine deck. It splatted on his engine deck at a ridiculous angle. That's why the splat is so long, and managed to penetrate. And that's because the E75's roof deck is 40mm thick. And so if you know how the overmatch mechanics work in World of Tanks, and that you have to, the caliber of your gun has to be over 3 times the nominal thickness of the armor that it hits to always penetrate, then you'll figure out that if I was using the 120mm, I wouldn't have penned the E75 there. It would have bounced off the top of the tank at that ridiculous angle. However, because the 127mm is over 3 times the thickness of the 40mm plate, I overmatch it, go in at a crazy angle, look as if I'm some horrible pigeon that's done some splat on the top of his tank, and I do 444 damage. And so that, for me, was kind of a key moment. Sometimes it's not so much about the alpha damage of the gun, or even the DPM of the gun. The caliber of the gun itself is also very important. And even though your alpha damage only goes up from 400 to 470, the fact that your caliber has gone up to 127 means that you can now penetrate all 42mm plates and lower, whereas the 120mm would be only going through 39mm plates. And you'll be very surprised how many armored plates there are in World of Tanks that are 40mm thick, which you can do funky things with if you have good knowledge of the game. And so I feel a bit contradicted now. I kind of came to the conclusion myself that, well, the 120mm slightly higher DPM, better premium rounds, better penetration, better aim time, better accuracy. You can clutch in the shots. Surely if you're a higher skilled player, then you're going to do better with the 120mm. Well, yeah, there is that. But also, if you're a player who has advanced knowledge of all of the thicknesses of the plates, especially the upper hull plates and even the roof decks of tanks, then you could probably make this 127mm work in ways that the 120mm just couldn't. But then again, there are going to be scenarios like that where your accuracy of this gun just becomes a little bit frustrating. And I'm trying to finish off an E75. I don't need the 470 damage. Give me the rate of fire so I can get ready to shoot again to finish off the tank that's on 92 hit points. And so you're seeing the good and the bad. Have we ever managed to just finish off a tank here when we needed to have about 440 damage? Well, did we finish off that T-28 prototype? I don't even remember. Maybe. That looks like that was just about the right kind of damage. But on the other hand, would the 120mm be able to get those extra shots in? Well, there you go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. 502 damage to the T110E3. It's impossible for the 120mm to finish off that Tier 10 American non-turreted heavy tank in a single shot, but the 127mm was easily able to do so. So we're going to try and swing our tank around here to finish off the mouse, but you know, just a few many tanks, higher tier tanks to take out here. 4k damage, 4 kills. Look, this wasn't an incredible, sassy game. I did make that mistake early on where I lost pretty much all of my hit points, which forced me to play a little bit more passively. But hopefully some food for thought and depth in this review to enable you to make the decision about what gun you would like to choose and why. So our first game was an ace tanker for 1,709 base experience points in a tier 9 vehicle. That is very decent in a 6.5 minute game. A steel wall, how much damage did we block here? 3,200, enough to kill the tank 1.5 times over. A high caliber for 7,200 damage. And a high caliber for the 6 kills that we picked up. And because we didn't fire any premium rounds, we make 60k profit with a premium encounter, would make 27k profit at tier 9 without one. Next up on Karelia, it was a defeat, but we finished second on damage, I guess, on our team behind the Jagdpanzer 100, but far and above him on experience. Tried to do everything that we could here. Again, I don't think I fired any premium rounds, so we make 33,000 credits profit. And after we threw away our hit points, we still made pretty good use of our armor, blocking 2,050 frontally at the end of the game. And so the AMX M4 51, do I think this is an utterly incredible tank at tier 9? Well, yeah, it's not bad. In my first 69 games, I've been able to win 70% of them, and I'm pretty much only playing solo. My average experience, my damage is pretty alright as well. I just feel so consistent in this tank. I don't feel that there is a scenario where the vehicle just feels useless. The 120mm just feels absolutely awesome and consistent for my playstyle, but I also understand the benefits of using the 127mm as well. This vehicle pretty much has everything apart from that side profile. And you know a tank has to be pretty good when it's trading blows backwards and forwards with the Conqueror, which probably has to be one of the best tanks at tier 9 at the moment. And so the AMX M4 51 is definitely on my recommended list of tier 9 heavy tanks for you to try out. But one word of advice, I wouldn't recommend selling this vehicle to be able to maybe get the credits to jump up to tier 10, because from what I've read and also my experience, this might be the better tank tier for tier. And so that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this tank review, or maybe it was just useful for you. If it was, please consider giving it a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments what you think about the AMX M4 51. Do you think it's absolutely beautiful at tier 9? Or if you tried it, absolutely hated it, and rage sold it for some reason? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.